It's another feedback episode today. My friend Hayley Emin, who is an actor and writer, has read the new screenplay, which is titled Everyone's a Critic, and has been kind enough to give me some notes. We spoke for almost an hour, but I've edited it down to 10 minutes for this video. So, hello Hayley. Thank you for reading my script.
Hello, thank you for giving it to me.
So, first things first, what were your first impressions?
First impressions. I liked it. I thought it was interesting. It was very stylistic. It actually gave me, I don't know if you've read D.B.C. Pierre's Vernon God Little.
I can't say I have, no.
It's this sort of very satirical piece with these sort of caricatures from Texas, sort of the US stereotypes. And it was interesting that you sort of taken that maxim of everyone's a critic and made it very literal. So I thought it was very interesting. I like how we end up. I think the only thing is that I didn't necessarily buy or feel how we get there. I sort of liked the overall arc and how we that sort of end result. So I liked the ending, I just don't know if I bought the journey.
Okay, so it was a bit of a whiplash at the end.
Yeah, I was kind of going, oh, well, I like that. I just don't know. I just don't know what the route was to get there. I suppose my main thing was that it felt like you'd taken the antagonist and made him the protagonist.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I assume was purposeful.
It sort of went off. I wrote out a beat sheet before I started writing it, and a lot of characters were supposed to come in and then disappear. So Katzenberger was only going to be in the beginning of the script, and then it would be different filmmakers and things like that as it gets towards the end. But as I was writing, I was thinking, this cast is getting a bit big, so I started reincorporating characters.
Yes.
And as a result, it ended up being more about Katzenberger than I thought it was going to be. As originally intended. It was going to end with a bloodbath, sort of like Taxi Driver.
Or Inglourious Bastards, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And when I finally got there, I thought, I've been so obviously heading towards this point that I can't do it. It needs to be subverted.
That's interesting. I think the first scene between, I know you call her by Katzenberger, for some reason she's still Zoe in my head.
Okay.
I think maybe that's the acting thing. I need to know the first name. I thought we were going to follow Zoe or Katzenberg much more closely than we actually did. Mainly because she was the person with the want, with the desire, with the, the aim, if you like. And then the critic was sort of the natural antagonist, if you like, because the story, I suppose, is partially about being critiqued and also being creative, and how reliant are you on that criticism, and how much do you take it on board, and how much does it affect you as a creator.
Yes.
So I sort of found it odd, actually, that we followed the critic, and it was an interesting twist. But I think what didn't quite work for me is, although this sort of world that's been created is very extreme and a little bit I almost thought it was fantastical. I thought at first that perhaps the critic was going to come in as the sort of agent of chaos, if you like, and almost like I don't know if you've seen Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but
not all of them.
Not all of them. There's a bottle episode called Superstar, in which this very sort of pathetic character, who's not one of the main the Scoobies as they're called, casts a spell, and everybody sort of falls in love with him and thinks he's amazing, even though he's quite mediocre.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that this perhaps was going to be the choice of plot or storyline, in the way that I didn't quite understand why the critic was so sort of popular, because his reviews are quite typical of reviews, if you like. They're a little bit wanky, to put it articulately. So when we sort of followed him, I thought, okay, is this sort of going to get broken down? Are we going to find out a bit more about him? And I didn't feel like we did. I was kind of going, okay, well, where's Zoe? Where's Connor even? I quite liked Connor because he was so real.
I sort of saw... Have you ever seen the film Being There? It's a Peter Sellers film.
No, I don't believe I have.
It's one of the last films he made before he died, and it's like his whole career was heading towards this film. He plays a character called Chauncey Gardner, who's he's almost like a Forrest Gump figure. He's very slow speaking and thoughtful, but all he does is he talks about his garden. Everybody who talks to him thinks he's speaking in metaphor, but he's actually speaking literally about his garden.
Sure.
And everyone thin's he's wonderful, despite the fact that he's actually very, very bland. He's very boring character, and everyone's going, no, he's got such insight. And unfortunately, that's something I see mirrored in everyday life all the time. Sometimes the most blandest and innocuous stuff is lauded, whereas the most exciting stuff is sort of ignored.
Yes, yeah, it did seem it's by no means, something that you've sort of done out of accident. It definitely seemed like a decision, but I think I sort of became a little bit fatigued by it. Zelda was my other point. So she, I suppose, is your antagonist. I wasn't enthralled by her. I didn't find her interesting because, she cares about money and that's it. And I suppose, you can make the argument that some people only care about money, but there tends to be a reason why, and we never find that out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't have much to respond with that, so I take that criticism.
My very first opinion would be that I would perhaps change who your antagonist and protagonist are and get rid of Zelda altogether. But if you're keeping the people in their positions as they are, I feel like we need to know, or at least understand, why having this sort of empire, this sort of business, this money-making machine matters so much to her. Well, I quite like the Save the Cat phenomenon that's Blake's book. I think it can also apply to villains in the way that often you'll see some of the best, most complicated villains often have something or a quality that might be better fitted the hero. They might be very polite and articulate and very intelligent, like the gentleman Chris Waltz plays in Inglourious Basterds again. I can't remember his name, but he's...
Oh, yes, the Nazi officer.
Yes. He's a wonderful villain. Because, firstly, he's a Nazi, so we don't like him for obvious reasons. But then he's such a twisted, wonderful, fleshed-out character because he has all these other qualities that you wouldn't necessarily attribute a villain, and it puts you on edge and out of your comfort zone, and you don't expect it. And, he's clever. I think that's another thing. Make your villain incredibly clever, which, Zelda is. She's abusing the system. But I think I just don't understand why she's the villain for the critic. I don't understand why they've been paired together as opposing forces of what you're talking about, which is sort of the value of creativity and criticism and people who criticise things without giving anything of their own or, giving it a go. I think I'm still stuck on that. Because the critic doesn't speak, and even in, you can have silent characters if you like, but even his actions aren't necessarily always described. He's quite passive. He gets brought to this party with Johnny, and Johnny's sort of going off and having a wonderful time, and then someone throws herself on him. He doesn't really do anything. Other than, I suppose, write these things, but he's doing that anyway. That doesn't really change.
Okay.
I think that was the reaction I had. I didn't really want to follow this guy because I wasn't that curious about him, because an audience coming in, and certainly me coming in, we're probably going to have the assumption that somebody who tries to create things has more worth and is maybe more worthy of watching than somebody who doesn't. In which case, if we're going to follow the critic, we need the Save the Cat moment, weirdly. I think we need to know why we should be following this guy, why we should like him.
Okay.
Because the critics, and he doesn't have to be likeable, of course, that's the old thing, they don't have to be a wonderful person, they just have to be sort of captivating.
Yeah, they have to show that they are redeemable.
Yeah, certainly. And I think just having him speak in those sort of long reviews and not sort of want something more, I think maybe that's touching on the essence of it. I don't really know what he wants other than to continue critiquing things.
So at what point did you start to miss Zoe Katzenberger?
It felt strange that I got introduced to Johnny, because it was almost like a montage, wasn't it? This sort of flurry of information, and he takes down this restaurant. We meet lots of different people in different places who sort of want to be critiqued and want that sort of prestige. And I think I was sort of confused. I was a bit like, I don't know who I'm supposed to connect to here. It seemed like a weird use of scene time, and obviously film we only get, an hour and a half, to sort of introduce so many different people. But the ones that we get to know best, and I felt like the most fleshed out, were certainly Zoe and Connor. And so probably about that point. Yeah, I don't know. Well, I hope I've thrown some spanners in the works. Yes, anyway. No. Some of them might be useful, and some of them you can just whack me over the head with and go, "How dare you!"
Yes. Well, yes. Let's wrap it up there. That's you have given me plenty to think about and plenty to edit we've been talking for almost an hour. So yes, thank you for that. Do you have anything you want to promote at the end? What's the name of the film that you're going, the fantasy film?
It's called A Fairy Tale After All. I think it's coming somewhere this year because we don't know where it's going. It might come to a streaming service. It may just come in the form of a DVD sent to all my closest friends and my mum. But yeah, that's hopefully coming this year. I play a character called Chickpea in it, a small blue Muppet, which has been my hardest role to date.
Did you do it method? Did you have to live amongst other Muppets?
Oh, I did. I was on my knees, so I was the right sort of, 4-foot height. I painted myself blue. I only opened my mouth on the vowels. It was a difficult existence, but I survived. So if you'd like to see me do that, A Fairy Tale After All hopefully comes out sometime this year.
Great. Well, I look forward to it.
Thank you, and thank you very much for having me.
No worries. Thank you. There's a lot of very useful feedback in there and stuff I'm going to be working on for the next draft. If you're interested in reading more about Fairy Tale After All, I've left a link to the IMDb page in the description of this video. I'm Scott Kingsnorth, and I'm making a movie.